Today, I'm going to be showing you how to make a 14th century dagged hood, similar to the type of hoods found at Herolfness. We're going to have a button front and silk lining. I'm going to start with 1 yard of 60-inch wool. I'm going to fold that in the center. Make sure we're all even up here. And the fold will end up being the very top of my hood. I've created a pattern, and all of the measurements can be found in the PDF at the end of this video. My pattern has 14-inch face that will end up being 28. If you happen to have a lot of hair or a very large head, you can increase this measurement. 10 inches from under the chin down the front of the hood, 17 inches from the back of the neck to the bottom of the hood, and 42 inches in the curve around the bottom, and 28 inches from top to bottom. I'm going to lay that on my fabric. At this point, I could cut my hood straight up and have no lira pipe at all. If I would like a lira pipe, I can add that on. If I would like to lengthen my lira pipe, I have some scraps here. I can fold that in half and add on. Make sure to do a 1/2 inch overlap because that's going to be a seam allowance. And now we can sew that bit on and have a longer lira pipe. I like to use silk dupioni. It is not a period fabric, but it looks really lovely. You could choose cotton or linen would be a good choice. Any of those are perfectly acceptable. My silk is not 60 inches wide, and so I'm going to have to fold it lengthwise. So this is going to actually take me 2 yards of silk. If I had a 60-inch silk, I could do it in a yard. I will have extra. Going to take my same pattern. I'm going to just fold my lira pipe out of the way for now. And I'm going to fold that with the top along the fold. If you wanted to, you could add a seam at the top and use 2 pieces of fabric, not folded, but separate pieces of fabric. I do not want to line the lira pipe, and so I'm just going to cut my lining straight up, but it makes the lira pipe lay down a little more smoothly if it is not lined. So where the lira pipe is going to go, first I'm going to attach my added on lira pipe bit. I like to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. For the purpose of the video, I'm using black thread so you can see what I'm doing. You would probably like to use thread that matches your fashion fabric. On the curve around the back of the neck, I'm going to grade that just a little bit with some snips. I have not sewn the front because we're going to be putting the lining in to make a button front hood. I'm going to sew the back seam on my lining. However, here's a little secret. If you leave a section unsewn, you'll be able to put in your dags and finish all of your hood and then turn it so that you have no machine stitchings showing. I'm going to sew the hems of my fashion fabric and my lining together. Having sewn together my fashion fabric and my lining all the way around the hem, up the front, around the face. Just as with the back, I'm going to trim my corner with my dags being 5 inches wide by 4.5 inches high. I like to use a piece of chalk, and this is just plain old chalkboard chalk like you get at the toy store. Now recall, on the front it's going to overlap about 1 inch. So you want to think about, do I want to have an opening there or do I want to have a dag? I think it looks better if you have dags that overlap. So I have done a piece that is 2/3 the size of the regular dag, such that I can mark that . Now that my dags are marked, I already have the bottom stitch done. So I'm going to stitch up, across, and down, and that will finish each of these corners. So it's less likely that I'll have any shredding or tearing as I wear my hood, and it will last a bit longer. Down below the black hem thread. When I get to the top, I'm going to stop, and I find it helpful to do a back stitch here because it helps secure where you're going to be cutting later. So you see, this is where we're going to be having our dag. Now we're ready to cut out our dags. I like to use pinking shears for this so there's no fraying, and to clip the corners, a nice sharp pair of regular scissors. So I'm going to cut up, trim my little V. I could add a drop of fray check, especially if you're using a fabric that likes to shred a little bit. Cut the corners and move on to your next one. Turning the hood right side out. Remember the opening that we left in the lining? I'm going to reach my hand in there. Going to pull everything through that hole, and I'm going to turn my tabs . You might find an unsharpened pencil helpful to get your corners all cornerized. And I still need to turn my lira pipe. And I'm ready to press it and add buttons and buttonholes down the front. Now that my hood is all ironed, I'm ready to add where I'm going to put in my buttonholes. You could add buttonholes by hand or by machine, whatever works for you. I always like to be able to leave a little bit of space around the head so you can fold back the lining if you find yourself so desirous. So I usually start my buttons not at the point, but right under the chin. I also like to stop my buttons when I'm even with my dags. Having sewn my buttonholes, I'm now ready to cut them open. I like to use just a plain old cutting board, lightweight hammer, and a small chisel. You can get these at the local fabric store, or I suppose you could get one at the local hardware store. What I like about them is you're able to do a straight cut. To mark where my buttons will end up. I'm just going to sew those on. We've attached all the buttons and our buttonholes, and if you recall, we still have our opening in the back. You can either whip stitch that closed or do a quick machine stitch. Either way to finish that up. And now we have our button front Herolfness style hood with dags.